So welcome everyone, an official welcome. My name is Joanna Kerr and I am a librarian with London Public Library. And I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Please use the chat in your Zoom to let us know if you have any difficulties at all. But the Q&A is what we're going to be using for questions for our guests tonight. Again, that's the two speech bubbles along the bottom, Q&A. So what we'll do is go through here, and I'm going to just welcome in. We have Emily just in the other room here helping behind the scenes. Emily is a librarian here at the Public Library as well. Thanks, Emily, for joining us. And of course, we have our guests, Sally and Eli are here too, and we'll see them very soon. I wanted to point out a few things. Live transcript is available tonight if you would like that. I've enabled it. You'll see a little box with the letter CC at the bottom of your screen, live transcript. You can have that turned on if you like. However, there are some limitations to this service. It only transcribes in English, unfortunately, and is affected by volume levels and background noises. So full captions will be available with the recording of this program. I see a question here tonight. Yes, I will be providing a link in an email to everyone with the recording. We just have to get the captions on it. So we're going to make those available at the end of the series. Great. So, and we'll have it on our YouTube channel as well at the library. So I'd like to share my screen now to start with a few slides before we get going. Let me just do that. Sorry, I'm just going to do one quick thing as we get going here. All right. Wasn't entirely prepared for this part of it, apparently. I'll just take one moment. Thanks for your patience. All right. Yeah, I think I've put the file somewhere else. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead with the rest of the program without my slide for the moment. So what I'd like to do to start this evening is to acknowledge where I'm joining you from tonight. Our library system is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Lenape, Attawaddaron peoples. The Crown treaties in this territory are known as the Upper Canada Land Surrenders. These treaties continue to be living treaties. The First Nation communities in this region include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live and to gather here. May we all recognize our own responsibility in the stewardship of this land. We invite you to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action and to reflect on acts of allyship with and actions to support Indigenous communities. The link to these calls to action is being shared in the chat. Acts to raise awareness and take personal action could also include reading books by Indigenous authors, which will be included in the follow-up email after this program, or by connecting with local Indigenous serving organizations. Thank you for reflecting on this acknowledgement and invitation to personal action. So our agenda for this evening, we'll meet Eli Baxter and Sally Kewayosh, and then we'll hear from each of them. Then we'll share their thoughts, and they'll share their thoughts with each other before our question and answer period. And just a reminder to submit your questions in the Q&A box at any time. It is our intention to offer a welcoming and inclusive environment for everyone this evening. Please reflect on this as you share your thoughts and questions. So now I will introduce our guests. Eli Baxter was born in an Ojibwe community 500 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay, Ontario. A member of the Caribou clan, Baxter was raised in the traditional way on the trap line along the Albany River. Ojibwe is his first language. After receiving a degree and teaching certificate from Lakehead University, Baxter taught elementary grades in White Dog, Ontario. He then taught the Ojibwe language from junior kindergarten to grade 8 on the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation. At Western University, Baxter designed, wrote, and taught the Algonquin language and culture course for 17 years. He has contributed to the Anishinaabe news media and remains active in policy and research affecting Indigenous law and language. Eli's book, A Person as Worthy as the Earth, was published last year by McGill Queen's University Press. The book is available to borrow from London Public Library. We'll just include that link in the chat for you. Sally Kewayosh is from the Walpole Island First Nation, located southwest of London, with both Ojibwe and Cree ancestry, and holds degrees in film studies from Western University and a Master's of Fine Arts in Film Production from New York University. As a First Nation woman, Sally creates films as both a producer and a director that inherently and overtly exemplify First Nation culture. She is currently teaching filmmaking at Western University in the Faculty of Information and Media Studies. A very warm welcome to you both. I'm just going to change our screens so that we can see you. There we go. So welcome, welcome, Sally and Eli.
Thank you.
So we're going to start our conversation tonight with you, just to get some of the stories behind the descriptions I just read. So Eli, we'll start with you, and we'll be talking about your book tonight, of course, which was published last year. When I read it, I appreciated how you maintained a connection to your language throughout the text, both in providing translations for English words and in explaining Ojibwe words. One example I wanted to share as I asked this first question was in the book, you talk about the Ojibwe word for spring, meaning soft earth as the ground melts. So I really appreciated that I connected with the language as I read your book. So can you talk a bit about why you wrote the book?
I tashwete Eli Baxter Jinkas King Donjiba Tashwea Tiknatora. One of the things that us Anishinaabe do is when we introduce ourselves, we give our name. Atik is my clan, which is the Caribou clan. And also I mentioned that from originally from Wookie Post, Agwo King. So that's the Anishinaabe way of introducing yourself. And first of all, I'd like to thank the London Public Library for doing this. And also Joanna Kerr. There's a lot of work in the background. Emily Migres for doing this. And also Sally Kewayosh. I remember meeting your parents a long time ago, and I'm really glad that you're helping promote this presentation. Your participation is great, Migret. And then the reason why I wrote this book, Akiwenze, a person is as worthy as the earth. Akiwenze is a title that is bestowed to elders that have lived for a long time on the earth here. And so they know the power and the secrets of the earth. So that's why one of the terms that I wanted to get out there from the Anishinaabe language. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. And also for people to read what our history was like before European contact. So that's the first part of the book, was the Anishinaabe Bumatiziwin here before European contact. And what our education system was like, what our laws were like, what our hunting and gathering societies were like. So I wanted to put that out there from an Anishinaabe point of view. our way of knowing. And then another reason why I wrote the book was to let people know that there's a lot of Anishinaabe, a lot of First Nations people that didn't go to residential school when they were small, as infants and toddlers and young people. I think about the average age was about 6 or 7 when we went to residential school. But there was a lifestyle before we went to residential school with our moms and dads, our aunts and uncles, all our relatives. So that another reason why I wrote the book. And then the other reason was to show the Hunting and Gathering Society, and that my generation, we're the last ones that speak the language fluently. So I wanted to get it out there. And the third part of the book was because of what happened when we went to residential school. All the changes and all the experiences that happened there. And then, that's where my book ends for that. So that will make you wonder, okay, what happened to you after? But that's the second book
Yes,
I'm starting to write.
that's great.
But it's difficult. So that's basically why I wrote the book. And another reason is because of vanity.
Vanity. Thank you.
And another reason too was to have other people from my generation and also people from my experiences with First Nations all across Canada to start writing their own stories so that people will hear what our history.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's about it, because I could talk for hours.
Thanks, Eli. We'll go to Sally and then I'll come back to you with another question. So Sally, can you tell us more about why you were drawn to filmmaking and telling stories through film?
Sure. And again, thanks for having me, Joanna. I appreciate everyone coming to hear Eli and I chat. I guess for me, filmmaking, as Eli's book even outlines, is a way of storytelling, right? So it's, I didn't realize that it was so culturally ingrained within me to be a storyteller. I mean, I guess I knew it as a child growing up. You hear aunties and uncles telling stories, moms and dads, and Eli can attest that my parents like to tell stories as well. So it's just always been in my world, right? And my mother's an artist, so we always grew up with lots of drawing and painting implements in our home. So visual art was always part of my life as well. So filmmaking is really a medium that joins these two traditions that I grew up with and that feel very natural to me. I have stories to tell, but more importantly, I think as a filmmaker, I like to try and help other people, other community members, elders, tell their stories as well. So through my training, I'm able to help other people in my community realize their visions as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Sally.
Great, no worries.
And we'll just take a few more minutes. Just one more question for each of you. So Eli, back to your book, and I was so interested in the origins of the words that you were using and describing. So one of them that stood out to me, and I know we've talked about this too, is the word for white people in your book. So the translation is people who don't tell the truth. Can you talk a bit about that?
We grew up, the term that they used, our elders, our parents, was Shaganashimo. Shaganashimog. Shaganashimog would be the plural form. And then Shaganashi, Shaganashimowe is the language that they use. And Shaganash is almost like, not really telling the truth. Shaganashimo is comes from that from that term, and that was because of the way we were treated with our treaties. Remember, these treaties happened from, the 16, 17, 1800s. And through our ancestors that experienced all of these treaty makers and government officials, people like that, we started noticing that, we were promised stuff, but we never really got the stuff that was promised. So through the years, that is where Shaganashimowens or Shaganashishag came from. So it's just a description, I guess, of the English. But just to let you know, we also had a word for the French. Okay, the French is gauche. That's what we call the French, because when they came upon our lands a long time ago, we would see them coming by their canoes, and our ancestors recognized them as French because the canoes, they would go back and forth when they're in the water because of the paddlers from the left and right side. So that would be the togosh is the vehicle, the canoe. And but say way mitig, the word mitig is in there, and that means stick. And then the way is the thing going back and forth. Okay, so way mitigosh has something to do with a stick going back and forth. And the stick was the cross, the wooden cross that was always at the front of these big birch bark canoes that they used for traveling. So another, in our language, another descriptive form of a certain type of people.
Thank you.
That's another example.
Yes, lots of examples from the book. That was just one to pull out. So I'm sure we'll talk about more later on. But one last question for Sally before we hear from each of you. Sally, I just wondered if you could take a few minutes to talk about a project, film project or otherwise, that you're most proud of, something that you found the most fulfilling to work on.
There's a few actually. The film that we're gonna have a look at later in the program, Ours for Routines, is a piece that I directed for Sesame Street, and it's stars family members of myself and my partner in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So an Indigenous family on Sesame Street, just going about their day. Our niece Coralie could not have been cuter, as well as our star. But another project that I'm equally proud of is a documentary that I made about 3 little girls from my community, Walpole Island. It's called 3 Young Ladies, and it's a 30-minute documentary about 3 incredible young women in my community, all living with cystic fibrosis. So the families wanted me to create a film for awareness of the disease and to perhaps help with fundraising, things like that, and to give a glimpse into the everyday life and just the regular young women living with this illness. So being invited into community members' homes and getting to know these 3 incredible ladies was a highlight for me, for sure.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you. So what we're going to do in just a moment, I'm going to hand it over to Eli to talk to us. But before I did that, I wanted to just send one more question out to everyone attending tonight, because I think one thing that came up for me in all of this was that I realized how little I know about the Indigenous languages to Turtle Island. And so I just found that it was surprising to me how, as I say, how little I did know. So I'm just going to see if I can just go into this. Just going to see if I can relaunch here. Yeah. So I'm going to put a question up on your screen. The question is, do you know how to say hello in any Indigenous language? As I say, for me, this was a personal reflection on how little I knew. So thank you for participating. I'm just seeing the answers coming in. So just take your time. If you don't see the poll coming up, feel free to click on that polls link. It looks like a little bar graph on the bottom of your screen. Okay, I think we've got everyone in there. So let me just show the results of that. So here we have about half and half. So 49% saying yes, they do know how to say hello in an Indigenous language, and 51% saying no, they don't. And I relate to that. So something to reflect on as I read Eli's book and in my life, obviously. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. Thank you for participating. Any chance that we can check in with you, we'll do that throughout the evening. So I'll stop sharing that. And so for now, Eli, I'm going to turn it over to you to share your talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all you.
When I started writing this book, I was talking to a friend of mine, Matthew Ryan Smith, and I got to know him, and we're trying to get programs together, and he was working for a museum, and he asked me to do a couple of projects with him, so I did, and with the language, and I think you were saying that this was the first time that he ever heard anybody talk language from a fluent speaker. So we kind of got talking about the language and the history and stuff like that, and about he got really interested in me talking about my life before residential school way up north, all the lifestyle that I lived through, along with my brothers and sisters, my cousins. On the Albany River, and so we kind of got talking, and because Matthew was really interested in hockey, I talked to him about my dad when we used to go doing the Hunting and Gathering Society lifestyle. In the middle of winter, must have about 4, 5, 6 years old before I went to residential school. I remember in the middle of winter, we would be traveling by sleigh, dog team, and we would have to set up a camp. So we were still nomadic at that time, and we set up this one camp in one of our camping sites. They set up the tent with spruce boughs for flooring. And my dad would go chop water from the ice, and then he would make the fire in the wood stove, and then so he would prepare that living space. We were going to live there for about a couple of months in the middle of winter, and then the last thing he put up was rabbit snare wire. And he would use it as an antenna, like an outside antenna. And and then he would hook up the radio to listen to. There's only 2 programs we could listen to. Our dad used to listen to the Hockey Night in Canada in the radio, and also Grand Ole Opry on Sundays. So those are the only 2 programs, because you had to save the battery for the radio. So he thought that was pretty interesting, and that it should be I should write it down or something. So that's where the book came from, just collaborating with Matthew with that. And so I started writing the book, but I didn't want to have it just just about me. So I decided to write the book before European contact. What was the language like before European contact here on Turtle Island? And so I mostly talk about the condition of the language, how the language was used by everybody at that time, the economy, the politics, and how to live, education. What our education system was like. And in the book, I talk about that we never had jails or anything like that, and we never really had police or anything like that, because all of our ancestors at that time, we were taught to be warriors, and so so we had all these phases of responsibilities that we had. And the language was the most important thing through our Tatiba Chimowina, which is our storytellers, storytelling. And our stories, right from infancy to adulthood, was because of the knowledge that we got was from all these stories. Wisekwechak from up north where I'm from was a trickster, and also down here is named Nanabush. And Gloskap from the Micmacs from the East Coast. So that was what our lifestyle was like before you. And then I was myself and all my relations up north and all the people of my generation, we did experience that lifestyle before European contact, how people used to live a long time ago, where we only were taught in the language and heard the language, and everything was in the language. So that's where my book came from. And then I also wrote about what my experiences were like growing up in the classroom of the wilderness, let's say, of why. And one of the most amazing things I always think about was there really wasn't any accidents that would kill us, or any diseases that killed us, or maimed us, or anything like that. Especially with our group, like our families. Our family was a big family. Like there was about 40 of us growing up. My aunts and uncles and their kids. And there was never really any major accidents or people getting killed or getting lost or anything like that as we were growing up. And so I thought that was pretty amazing with that. And we always had the wilderness, the animals, and to grow up with them in the stories, and watching them in how we use them with from the stories, how we show respect for the lives of the animals, the plants, and how our moms. I remember our mom and dad telling us how to treat all the animals and the plants with respect. Actually, how we do that. And then that was good until we went to school, and we would come back from school just during the summer times. But we're in school from, let's say, the end of August, beginning of September to we never. Then we came home at the end of June, actually. And then through those years, I remember losing the language. Every time I came back from school, I would have forgotten some of the words, terminology, and stuff like that. So that was kind of that was disheartening. And then I went to after residential school. Our whole lifestyle changed because we couldn't survive in the wilderness anymore because that hunting and gathering society just collapsed. And our parents knew that. I remember our dad telling us, says, "Nah, this lifestyle is not for you anymore because you're too educated." I remember him telling me that. He says, you don't know anything of the bush life, he says, and he says, you're too educated and you're too tall for nothing, he says, for being in the bush. So that was a little bit of the book anyway that I wrote about. But it was interesting to write that book, and I'm hoping that everybody that reads it will get something different from this book, because it has spirituality in it, it has the language in it, it has history, it has geography, our education system, our politics, and how this Anishinaabe life, how we lived it, and how we are living it now. So the problem that we have now, us language speakers, is we don't have anybody to talk to anymore. Like every day, let's say, in the language. So that is one major problem that we're having. And one of the things I try to do is I try to, in my own head, I try to speak in the language and things like that. Just to myself, talking to myself. But so that is, one of the problems that we're having as fluent speakers. But there's a solution for that. Yeah. And one of the solutions that I've been thinking about is like what Sally is doing, is to have these Anishinaabe programs in the language, in film and social media, and also to have people that want to learn the language to have that they could see a person talking the language instead of just listening it to a recording or anything like that, because you don't see the facial expressions, the humor, the laughter, and it's so the language is very humorous, and it's very, very hard to find programs where there's actual Anishinaabe people talking to each other in the language, because there is all these body language cues and body language movements that is out there in the language when we speak. And one of the things every time we get together is with the family from up north, is when we get together, the most thing that is so good to hear is the laughter that we have in the language when we talk. So I know that there are solutions of getting the language back. And one of my dreams and visions I always talk about is to have the language in all First Nations communities to be at the same level as it was before European contact. So like, how do we get from where we're at now to be at that same level as in speaking the language? And it's mostly all oral too. How do you get the oral language back? So it's pretty. It's going to be pretty hard, but if we put our heads together, I think we could get something going. I think that's it. For now, anyway. Is that it, Joanna?
Yes, sorry, thanks. My mouse died for some reason, so thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to keep talking and talking.
No, I think that's wonderful. It's a great start. So thank you for starting that off and raising those important questions about language. And so I recognize we've been going for about 40 minutes now. So we're just going to take about 3 minutes, just recognizing that as we saw earlier, we've been looking at our screens for a while today, maybe most of the day. So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. And let me go back in here. There we go. So I'm just going to put a slide on right now. So let's just pause for 3 minutes. I'll invite you to look away from your screen, look as far as you can, whether it's out a window or something in the space around you. Maybe just take a moment to take a deep breath and give your eyes a rest for a moment. And if you need to take care of anything or get a beverage, why don't we take just 3 minutes before we resume our program with Sally, and and maybe even a time to reflect on any questions you'd like to ask for our question and answer period. So I'll just do a 3-minute countdown now, and I'll just gonna turn off my camera here. So yeah, just take your time. Okay, thank you for that pause. It's just nice to just take a breath every now and again. So I will just stop sharing the screen. Oops, sorry about that. And put my camera back on. All right, great. All right, so just a time to pause. And so now I'm going to welcome Sally to join us and share her talk.
Bonjour, everyone. Hello again. So I was invited just to kind of share my knowledge about filmmaking and my cultural background and have a chat with Eli about language. But first, I think I would love to show the short film I did for Sesame Street called R is for Routines. And I'll talk a little bit about that when it's finished. Joanna, are you playing it?
Yes, indeed. I'll do that right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
And thank you. Okay, I think we're good to go. All right, here we go. I'm just going to enlarge it and play.
R is for routine. When I wake up, first I have to go potty. I can do it by myself now. I wash my hands when I'm done. Next, it's time for breakfast. Max and I like fruit and yogurt. Breakfast gives me lots of energy for school. I wash my face and brush my teeth. Next, it's time to get dressed. Mommy helps me pick out my clothes for school, but I'm big enough to dress myself. Then Mommy does my hair. She's really fast at braiding. My job is to hold the elastics for when she's done. I like to help. Now all I need is my backpack, and I'm ready to go. The best part of my routine is walking to school with my best friend Shay. Hi Shay.
Hugs and kisses. Have a good day at school.
I love you.
Bye.
The letter R.
I hope you enjoyed the short film. It always brings back really fond memories for me. And just reflecting on what Eli was talking about before my segment, how cool would it be to have R is for routines in Ojibwe? You know, that would be, I think, a great tool to be teaching our young ones language, just the process of how to describe things or to just go about your day speaking your own language. So maybe we'll talk later, Eli. So that film was, as I said before, filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I had been living for the last 7 years. After graduate school, I moved home for a bit to Walpole Island and made the documentary I told you about before, Three Young Ladies. And then I moved to Albuquerque, where I taught at University of New Mexico and a media arts charter school, and did other film projects with kind of an indigenous filmmaking group that that's happening down there in Albuquerque. So we all got together and they helped me make this short film when I was awarded this this pitch from the Sesame Street workshop. So it was, I mean, they always say don't work with kids or animals, right? But our niece Coralie was maybe the most professional actress that I've ever worked with. She was a rock star the whole way through, never complained. I'd say, can you do it again this way? And she'd think about it for a second and say, mm-hmm. And that was it. And she would hit all her marks. Oh, she was just a dream. Anyways, it was a lot of fun to create that project. And I think it speaks to my objective in my artistic practice as well. I like my sets to feel like a community. I want to include as many community elements in front of the camera as well as behind the camera. Mentoring is a huge part of my own personal practice as well. So we usually have interns on set who, and this could just be young Indigenous people wanting to learn more about the craft of filmmaking and where do I start? What does it look like? So come on over, come on set and help us out, and we'll train you on set. And if you like it, great. If you don't, well, at least now you know. But regardless of all of that, just as much community involvement as we can get, the better. And I think, actually, I'm trying to think if I've done a film that I've written or directed that didn't have those elements, and I can't say that I have. Even when I'm producing films for other filmmakers, Indigenous or otherwise, I try to have that. I have that in mind of caring for my crew like an auntie would for their nieces or nephews. I'm not really sure. What else would you like to hear from me, audience? I'm trying to see if there's any questions.
I'm just looking through here, Sally, and I think at this point, we've got some for Eli. Well, actually, why don't we do this one, because someone was responding to the poll that I put up there saying, how do you say hello? So maybe you want to talk about that. Why not?
Oh, yeah, Sally, that was a great little film. And I like the way how you're working with the media of storytelling. Film is a great form for storytelling. How to say hello? Well, in Ojibwe, it's always been bonjour, and in the Ojibwe language. And right now, a lot of people are saying anin, and which is another form of acknowledging people say hello. But I always say that bonjour was from us a long time ago, trying to find out Nana Bojo said, because he left us a long time ago. I'm thinking, okay, where, we were always saying, where is he? Is he still here with us? And is he taking a form of somebody we haven't met yet? So that when we say Bojo, we're actually asking the question says, are you Nana Bojo? For that. So that's where the term Bojo comes from. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you got it from the French bonjour. But I always say, oh, no, the French got it from us, the word bonjour. So that's where the word bonjour comes from. And so that is where, because you must remember that most of these words that we use in Ojibwe is that we do have meanings for it. That there's a history of the word. Word came from how it was used a long time ago, and the amazing part is it's still being used to this day. All of these words.
Yeah. Thank you, Eli. And so what we'll do, actually, there is a question for you, Sally, and then what we'll do is have you and Eli have a short conversation just before we get to our Q&A. But I just saw it after I looked at the hello, and Sally, if you wouldn't mind, or Eli, typing in that the spelling of hello in Ojibwe in the chat for everyone as well. But meanwhile, Sally, the question is, are there any TV shows or films that are totally in Ojibwe with English subtitles to see and hear more of the language? And I guess we could say Ojibwe or other Indigenous languages.
You know, I'm not entirely sure. Having lived in the United States for the last 7 years, we didn't really have access to APTN or and Canadian Indigenous programming. I will say that the Navajo Nation has been doing great things with their language representation in media. Star Wars has been dubbed in Navajo, and as has Finding Nemo. So there were some big movie premieres with those blockbuster films dubbed completely in Navajo. So I don't see why we can't do that up here too. But it would be fantastic to have that kind of language representation happening here, which would be, I mean, I would love to be part of it as well. I did see another question about what advice I would give to Indigenous youth on reserve or in rural communities. How would they get their start in filmmaking? Do you mind if I answer that, Joanna?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So my advice would be just to watch lots of movies, of course, and to get into writing your stories down. Okay, especially here in Canada, we do have different granting agencies that can help out with making and developing your first short films, and reach out to filmmakers. If you go to Imaginative, which is one of the largest Indigenous film festivals in the world, and it's a fantastic film festival with shorts and feature-length films, and even the Forest City Film Festival has Indigenous programming. Just try and get to places to see other people's work and to network and to get your name out there. We all want to help each other and realize our stories on the screen. So put yourself out there a little bit and reach out to those other Indigenous filmmakers who will be listed on those film festival websites. I hope that helps.
I also want to add something about this, what Sally was saying. Before the pandemic hit, I taught at Oneida. I was the GED teacher there. I did it for a couple of years before the pandemic hit. And that GED program, the good enough diploma that they receive. One of the things that I was talking to the students about and to the people who are running the program is that I wanted to start this screenwriting group, or even just a writing group with some the adult students that I was teaching, and then because that is just one sector of filmmaking, is to have Anishinaabe people, Haudenosaunee people gather as a group and start doing these writing workshops and writing scripts for TV or anything like that, with in mind of our Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee culture. How, because one of the things I found out about teaching adults was that the people were really, really great storytellers. Like, their oral skills in telling stories about themselves, about their community, about their history. I was really amazed with that. And so we did a lot of discussions with my students. So, and that's the other reason why I wrote this book, was to have First Nations people start writing scripts or writing for television and things like that, and have their own programs, right from on their communities.
Thanks, Eli. So I think what we'll do now, I'm just realizing we do have a lot of questions. So I think we'll go into that segment now, because I do want to get to people's questions. There's a lot of good ones here. So let's jump into that. So Eli, there's a question here for you. I'm going to start with the chat and then go to the Q&A to make sure I don't miss anything. So a comment here for you, Eli, is the question is, I'm curious if you found it difficult to recount the memories as you were writing your book, or was it cathartic? And based on your experience, what % of Ojibwe people are still fluent? So if you want to start with the first part about, did you find it difficult to recount memories in the book?
Well, not really, because it was as if I was talking to somebody orally about my experiences and what we had experienced growing up. And it's like writing this book was just like talking to somebody. And that's why I was saying that when you are a storyteller, you hit all the sectors of people that you talk to. As as a storyteller, because you're telling stories to people that already know these experiences, that have lived through those experiences. Then you go all the way down to people that never really realized that this is what had happened to a segment of Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people here in Canada. So that was. Well, it wasn't really that difficult for me anyway to write these things down, because they're still there. But for me anyway, they're still I could still use it from my Ojibwe language thoughts, and also the English thoughts but talking to other First Nations people, I'm truly amazed of how they remember all these things, what happened, because I never really talked to anybody that went through what we went through. I don't know if it's a cultural trait or anything like that. We don't really talk about this with even our closest friends or family or something like that, because it's a warrior trait that we still have in our culture. But as a friend, and where you have this avenue to talk and talk freely about things, it's not really hard to remember. Like, it wasn't really that hard. What was the other question?
Oh, that one. Sorry, I'm just having some trouble with my camera right now. I'm just trying to switch it out. So the other question was, what is the percentage of Ojibwe people that are still fluent in the language?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. Well, especially from where I'm from, Obuki, hardly any. What I'm gathering from my relatives and the people that I still know up there is that the language is being lost there, like by the kids, because of the Ontario school system that we have right now, and the language is not being used by everybody there now, and we're starting to lose our elders, and people. That's the language that they hear first is English right now. But I was talking to some people from further communities up north that are still living the hunting and gathering society. There are some kids, or there are kids in those communities that speak the language fluently, because that's all they hear when they're growing up is the language. And the most important factor is in learning the language is the mother and the female population in the communities. Is that because the fathers were out hunting and gathering and all that stuff, it was the mothers that looked after the education system from infancy to about when the kids were 7 or 8 years old. And I think that's what's still happening up north. And also in one of those northern communities, I was talking to a person, it was an education director about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago now. And one of the things he said was in their education program, they decided to have the kids only in the school that they had on their community. They taught the Ojibwe language from kindergarten to grade 3, and they took the kids out onto the land, and they only spoke Ojibwe to them. And then after grade 4 and up, I think the school went up to grade 8 in the community. They started teaching English to those kids, and I remember the education director saying that that cohort of kids that were taught Ojibwe only for the primary grades, when they did go to high school, because the high schools were in Solikab, Thunder Bay, it was outside of the community anyway. One of the things that they found out was those kids didn't drop out of high school. So there was, even though they started the English formal education in grade 4. So there is that Anishinaabe education system still being used up north, and that is what I think the secret is how do other First Nations communities do that especially down here. So I always talk about import-export. You import the language into one community, and then you export the language to another community. And so that you could have this whole family unit. All they do is speak Ojibwe until they're grade 4, let's say, for now anyway, stuff like that. But in my book, I talk about that I didn't start formal education like English until I was 7, but I knew people that started when they were 10, 11, 12 years old. And they went to, because the government didn't know that they were out on the trap line. So when they found out, they took those kids out and put them in a residential school. And those kids just excelled in the Ontario curriculum when they're 10, 11, 12 years old, because they've already mastered the Anishinaabe language already from their parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, older siblings, and so there is still a lot of Anishinaabe speakers, especially in the northern communities of Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and so there is this whole. I think we need to start a movement of going to those communities to get the language back to the communities that lost the language. So I think that's a good film for Sally to make.
Thanks, Eli. And I'll go to Sally for the next question here. There's a question about limitations when using filmmaking to visualize Indigenous stories. Can you talk about any limitations?
Sure. I suppose the main limitation would be appropriating stories from somebody who isn't involved in telling it or doesn't want you to tell it. So making sure that you have the right permissions in helping, not helping someone visualize their stories if it's not your own. And I think practicing respect is the biggest one. I know that there are some Indigenous cultures in the world, in Australia, for example, who cannot view deceased family members' images after they've passed. So there's a warning that's put on Indigenous films from that area, saying some of these people might be deceased now. So if this is part of your tribe, heads up, and maybe these people would leave the cinema. For the tribes that I'm working with, my own, that doesn't seem to be an issue. But again, it's just asking questions respectfully and really listening and honoring the answers that you're getting. You might get a no, and that's okay.
Thanks, Sally. I think what we'll do, I'm just looking at the time now. So we have about 15 more minutes for questions. So I will continue to go through the chat, and everyone here, please feel free to continue to add questions. Any that we don't get to, we'll do our best to answer after the fact and get back to you. So why don't we, Sally, I'm going to ask you another question. I see another one here about someone has asked if it was ever difficult, if there was ever a film that you were producing that you found difficult.
Yeah, the documentary, Three Young Ladies, that I directed and edited from my own community, I would say that it was difficult to edit that film, and making sure that I gave a balanced portrayal of all three girls and their families, and making sure that the intention of the film remained throughout the whole process. So always going back to thinking, well, what was the purpose? What was it that the families wanted me to make? It did take a really long time to edit because so there's some medical information and personal information in the film. One cut was like way too medical. One cut wasn't informative enough. And so it took me about 3 years to finish the editing process for that film. And then I just felt terrible that it was taking me so long. But crafting a story sometimes just takes time. So being compassionate with yourself and respectful of your subject matter, I think is the way to go. I know some filmmakers are more like aggressive in their storytelling. For me, I'm just not that. I'm not cut out that way. So just keeping the original intention in mind is, I think, the way to go. And yeah, some stories are just really hard to tell.
Yes, thank you. I'll go to Eli now for the next question, asking, when you say that you are the last generation of fluent speakers, do you feel sadness when you say that?
Sometimes I think of I think of, you know, what do other people feel like? The other Anishinaabe in my situation, how do they feel about this too? And what kind of stuff you know do they do to get the language back? Because sometimes when I'm down here, I kind of forget, let's say, a word or something like that, and then I would try and say it, and I would say it, but I knew, but I know right away that it's wrong, like it doesn't sound right. So I don't think about it for a while, and then after a while it comes back, or I phone up to my relatives, my sister, brother, and I say, how do you say this word again? And things like that. So it's kind of really hard to find a solution, or how okay. And then sometimes hasn't happened in a long time, is that sometimes I would speak or in the language in my dreams, like I would have a dream in the language, and people are talking in my dream. So I know it's still in there, but with if I don't use it regularly, I lose some of the words. But I do know when I say a word, say, oh no, that's not it. That's not how you say it. So it is hard. I'm thinking somebody should create a crisis line or something, where people would phone in to a place and say, how do you say this word again? It's almost like a helpline for us, the last of the Hunting and Gathering Society.
Eli, you could be the helpline.
Where do I go to if I can't find a word?
And so, Eli, in a related question, someone's asking if your children are fluent in your language.
I find that all native language speakers that went through my education, like that type where we spoke the language and then we got educated through a residential school and stuff like that, even though we're fluent speakers. Even though I know some people that are fluent speakers, that are, teachers of the language and stuff like that, but their kids don't speak the language because it's not a whole community thing. It's like it's only a family thing. They don't talk to anybody else outside of their family. Like, it's not a community thing. For me, my kids, before, when they were just toddlers and stuff like that, I would teach them the language, but I had to go to work, and then I'd come back, and my wife would tell me, it says, the kids, after you left, the kids came running to me and said, and they asked that question, says, Mom, how come Dad is speaking Spanish to us? So that whole thing doesn't work with just within a family. Because you have to, the language has to be used in let's say ceremonies, social settings, and also the kids have to hear the language from their own peers, and also because they have a standard that that they will be able to speak in the language, but there's nobody for them to speak, to bounce that language back and forth, because you need to have older siblings also for the older siblings to say to the younger kids, that's not how you say it. So there is that, the building blocks of the language, even from, just only one parent, being a speaker, and because you're not with the kids all day, because you're at work and things like that. But for us at that time, our mom was there with us all the time. Our cousins were there all the time before we went to residential school. So it's really, really hard to.
Would you say too that maybe, because my mother also was, Cree was her first language, but my sister and I don't speak Cree, and she didn't speak it to us. I'm wondering if there was like a lack of sense of urgency, like there's no way of knowing when you all had your kids, a few years ago, that the languages were going to be, the speakers were going to be going down and down and down. Like there was no way of knowing that. So had hindsight's 2020, I guess, is what I'm getting at. So perhaps if we were in the situation we are in now, it might have been more pressing to just, I'll just speak as much as I can to my child in our language and hope something sticks.
Yeah, but one of the things that people haven't heard about it, or haven't don't talk about it, was that most of let's say my generation and is most of the parents went to residential school when they were young, and then when they finished residential school, they started having their families, and they knew that their kids were going to have the same treatment in the residential schools as they did. So they didn't teach their kids the language and the culture to protect those kids, the next generation kids, so that they wouldn't get strapped for using the language, doing ceremonies and things like that. Okay, for us up north, we were given the language, but there really wasn't that much cultural teachings there, because I don't have an Anishinaabe name, because my parents didn't give us our Anishinaabe names, because they knew that we were going to get hit or strapped or anything like that if we bring those type of things up when we went to residential school. So they didn't give us the cultural teachings, even though we knew the language, but we didn't really, because they knew that we would be able to pick those up when we were adults, as we were growing, as we were growing up. So they kind of put everything on hold so that we wouldn't get punished for that. But I know some of my relatives, my sister, she always wanted to know what what spirituality was. So she followed all these different types of religious groups and stuff like that as she was as a young person, until as an adult, she finally hit her that there is Anishinaabe spirituality. And this happened to my other relatives also, and friends that I know, people that I know. I talked to them in powwows. I talked to people saying that they really, really want to learn the language and stuff like that, and culture and stuff like that. And then a few years down the line, I see them again, and they're picking up the language. They're going into ceremonies and things like that, because there was this huge population of apprehension by First Nations people should we do the ceremonies? Are we going to get hit or thrown in jail or anything like that? Because that was the type of feelings that I found that when I went to teach in First Nations communities. Because remember, me as a teacher, a certified teacher, I never taught in provincial schools. I only taught in First Nations schools as a teacher. So that was a personal decision anyway for me. But learned a lot of things.
Yeah. So Eli, you actually answered a few other questions that have come up. So we have about 4 more minutes here for questions, and then I'm just going to do a little wrap up. Sally, one of the things someone's asking about the name of the film with the 3 girls, if you're able to put that in the chat, the name of that film, so people can look for that.
In the chat, someone posted a link to it, actually. Sarah
there it is.
Michity, thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Posted a link to the film 3 Young Ladies.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Sorry, Joanna. For the word bonjour, do you want me to write it out? Or
Sure. Yep, for sure. I think someone did say, someone did put it up there, but
okay.
But yeah, well, yeah, it couldn't hurt to put it in there again. And so a few things, there are just so many things I don't want to lose here. So we'll certainly follow up with people. Someone had asked Eli if you could tell a story about maple trees is in there. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know that we have the time for it, but we can certainly look to do that maybe in one of your other sessions. Let me share, I think, one other question that we could have time for. I apologize to other folks, but we can certainly get back to you when I save the chat. There is a question here. They say in Northern Ontario, there are Cree and or Ojibwe speakers, but there are also OG Cree speakers. Could you describe the way that dialect draws on both Ojibwe and Cree languages, the relationships between the two?
Oh, okay. OG Cree, I'll make this quick. During the Manitoba Rebellion, okay, it's only one section called a rebellion, but the Anishinaabe there, from Manitoba, because of they were blamed because the Cree were blamed for being part of the Métis rebellion, so they were prosecuted by the mounted police. So what they did with the Cree is they traveled all the way west, and they were being chased by the mounted police, the Northwest Mounted Police at that time. So they were driven all the way to the foothills of the Rockies, and then they went up north to get away from the police. So they weren't followed after that. So the police went back to Manitoba. And then the Crees, through the years, eventually made it back to northern Manitoba and into northern Ontario. Okay, but my community of Wookiee and the other Abmatung, the other community on the Albany River, those are the 2 most northern Ojibwe communities a long time ago because of our migration story. Those 2 communities were Ojibwe communities. And then what happened was that the Crees that came from out west to resettle in northern Manitoba, they intermarried with the Ojibwes from up north there. So that's where OG Cree comes from, the Ojibwes and the Crees with that. But for us, it was the Hudson's Bay Company. They moved from, let's say, James Bay, Hudson's Bay. They had all these forts there, forts for the trading posts. And then they were told they had to move inland, west of James Bay and Hudson's Bay. So when they moved inland, all of these Hudson Bay managers and clerks, they had these Cree wives that they took with them to move from those James Bay trading posts to go further inland into Ontario. All of these trading posts that propped up, and one of them was Aguki, and the other one was Abmaton. And then so that's where how we also mingled with the Crees from northern Quebec during the Hudson's Bay Company trading segment, I guess. So there was so that's where you have Oji Cree, where that came from.
Thank you.
And the Crees and the Ojibwes and all there's a whole bunch of us tribes, nations that came from the Lenapes a long time ago. But that's a completely different teaching and story and stuff like that. But that's just a short version.
But even what you were talking about earlier, Eli, when talking about visiting my parents, and my mom speaks Cree, and you two can kind of understand each other, even though you're speaking slightly different languages. I've always tried to describe it as, say, like Portuguese and Spanish. People who speak Spanish to someone who speaks Portuguese, they can understand, maybe not answer back, but there's enough similarity that we can still all communicate. Would that be true, Eli?
Yeah, because when I listen to the Cree, especially from the Western provinces and also in Quebec and Northern Ontario, I can understand some of the words that they're saying, and they can understand me and some of the words that I'm saying. An example is aski. That in Cree that means the earth. In Ojibwe it's ake. So it's in Ojibwe, it's short and sweet, just like us. Aski is another form. And in Cree it's wachi for hello. All we say is bonjour.
So I'm sorry to say we're just about out of time, but thank you both so much for sharing all of your stories and your knowledge. There's so much to cover. And as I say, I will do my best to try and get the answers to the rest of the questions we weren't able to get to. So thank you. I'm going to share my screen just to share one last thing before we go. Just a moment here. There we go. So I'm just going to share this slide. And so here is just a quick reminder that the Indigenous Voices series will be hosting a speaker in January, February, and March through the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, which complement Eli's monthly themes with the library, January, February, and March. All of these events are open to everyone. So we're going to add the registration link to the chat right now. Stand by. Okay. The registration link will be there for the session tomorrow at 4 p.m. with Dr. Lewis Williams. So take a look for that. We've got the link in the chat for you. And our next event with Eli will be February the 3rd. He's going to be joined by his cousin, Bob Baxter, and they'll be talking about another theme in Eli's book, his experiences hunting, trapping, and fishing in the wilderness with his family. That's our next event. If you don't have a library card, please email me directly. I'll put my email address in the chat as well, but otherwise the registration link will be there for that February 3rd event. So let me stop sharing my screen here and bring everyone back. So I'll just join you here with another big thanks, and just another mention. We're going to put in the chat a short survey. We'd be happy to have you share your thoughts for this program and any others. I'll leave it to you two to say a final goodbye for tonight before we sign off. And a thank you to Emily behind the scenes. Thank you so much.
Migo sunt kit mai kana gipijaeg gipizin meg way Anishinaabe Ojibwe singait tashtimne dan gipizin the watchway kana gipijawach. I'd just like to say thank you for everybody that are coming, that came and viewed this session, and I really enjoyed doing this. Miigwech Emily, Sally, miigwech Joanna for putting this on. Another word in Ojibwe is kawabamin, kawabamin. That means I'll see you later. There's no word for goodbye in Ojibwe.
Kawabamin.
Kawabamin.
Thank you, Wilfer. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Eli, you should get on TikTok, do a word of the day.
Shy.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Mama P.
Bye, my